those joining online. I trust everyone here had a good chance to network and catch up over lunch. Now, this morning I was taking some notes, and I think we've established 3 key points: that mobility is not neutral, it redistributes opportunity. Regional attractiveness is multidimensional and many moving parts, and that the twin transition amplifies both opportunities and challenges. I think that was very clear from the panel discussion as well, but we're certainly trying to emphasise the opportunities. This afternoon, we're moving more towards the forward-looking perspectives, including scenarios, regional futures and policy responses. And the first part of our afternoon's agenda is 2 more scientific presentations. So, what might Europe's regions look like under a different transition pathways? So the MOBI-TWIN project developed scenarios to capture those possible alternative futures, reflecting on differences in governance, incapacity and mobility dynamics. So these are not predictions, but they're tools and possibilities, pathways, as I've said, to help us think about uncertainty, risk and how to make strategic choices within that matrix. So what happens next? This session, the future scenarios, how mobility will shape regional labour markets, is going to have a look at those based on the research and the science. As you can see behind me, we have 2 more excellent presenters. We'll hear in a moment, we'll hear from Dimitris, Ballas, Professor of Economic Geography from the University of Groningen on spatial, MSM and ABM modelling for future policy scenarios. But now to tell us about Euromod as a tool for social welfare impacts, we have Manos Matsaganis, full professor of public finance at Politecnico di Milano. So, Manos, over to you.
Thanks. Let me get them right. All right. Yeah. Thank you so much. How do I move straight to the slides? Yeah. We're a very high-tech project, but, you know, some parts of it are... Right. So I'll try to tell you about how Euromod, the European tax benefit model, entered into our research project in the 45 minutes that the organizers have generously allocated to me. So I wanted to check if you paid attention. Right. So... I'm not going to tell you the details about which part of the project we were responsible for, but basically our task was to see whether we can try to imagine what the 5 pilot regions that we selected would look like in the year 2035 under 4 alternative scenarios plus the baseline. And then we try to estimate how that would translate into an income distribution under each scenario. And this is where the model came into. You are familiar by now with the 5 pilot regions, I hope. You're probably unfamiliar with the alternative scenarios, but it would take me too long to describe them. Let me say that some are pretty good and some other scenarios not very good, and move on. So we used the Delphi survey, which colleagues of ours, but not me and my team directly worked on, but that was something that was done before we started. So the way it worked was that 60 experts from 5 countries were invited to put some flesh into the bones of the 4 scenarios to describe them in terms of, I don't know, population trends, share of high skilled workers under each scenario relative to the baseline. And the experts' suggestions were validated in a number of workshops in which 52 persons participated in in 5 countries. Then we took the Eurostat projections for the year 2035 and we reformulated the scenarios relative to the baseline. So the Delphi survey results, the experts' indications were that this is Castilla-La Mancha under Lion's Den, not a very good scenario, I think. Population down by 5.77%. So we took the population projections for the year 2035 and we multiplied by 1 minus 5.77 in order to arrive at the total population. And then, of course, the characteristics of the population in terms of age, gender, education, labor market status, and so on were also used to specify the scenario. So we ended up with 25 scenarios, 5 regions, 4 scenarios, 1 baseline per region. And so we had 25 synthetic populations, and we used these data sets as an input data set into EuroMod. Now, I guess I need to say a few things about EuroMod. We also use information on average earnings. So I don't know if you are familiar. EuroMod will hold its 30th birthday conference in Brussels in September. So it started 30 years ago in the mid-90s, and I was not among the very first, but almost. I joined the project in 1997. It started as a tentative research by a group of researchers led by François Bourguignon and especially Tony Atkinson. And it looked around at countries with tax benefit models. So it was Britain, France, that was about it. And gradually created fully harmonized tax benefit models for all member states. And at a certain point, EuroMod was taken over by JRC, Seville, and this is now managed, maintained, and updated regularly by JRC. So the way it works is that we take the population with all its characteristics, and we simulate the rules of the tax system and the social benefit system. So we can simulate policy changes or changes in, I don't know, economic trends or whatever, usually policy changes. So it appeals to those of us who would like to play God and say, well, let's see what happens if, you know, the top marginal tax rate went up to 95%, as it was in the mid-1970s. You know, not really, but, you know, that kind of thing. And we end up with output results, obviously, in terms usually of income distribution, but also winners and losers from a policy change and so on and so forth. Okay, so we did that for the 5 regions, and I'll show you some illustrative examples of the kind of results that we got. So this is Central Macedonia in terms of total population, and it changes classes. We have the baseline on the left, and you know, you can see how our estimate of population changes. This is a year 2035 for all scenario. Or the share of people over the age of 65 in Castilla-La Mancha. Again, you see how the Delphi results, in a way, translate into these our results through the process that I briefly described earlier, or the share of high-skilled workers in Groningen, the youth unemployment rate in Lombardy, female employment in northern East Finland, you know, the lot. These are just illustrative examples, but also to do with the distribution of income. So this is average income again in Castilla-La Mancha, but this is the share of population below 40% of median income in Central Macedonia. Obviously, the same indicators we produce results for in the other regions. This is total spending in millions of euros, total spending on social benefits in the Groningen area. Income inequality, this is a Gini coefficient multiplied by 100 in Lombardy. So you see how different assumptions of how the twin mobility might change the way regions will look like in 10 years, almost 10 years from now, how these different assumptions translate into different results, also in terms of income distribution. This is tax revenue for those with a fiscal bent among us in North Finland. Okay, so this is what we had committed to produce, and we did. We are glad to report. But then we went further in the sense that we used the resources of the project, not just financial resources, but also crucially the human resources, the quality and also quantity of expertise that exists within the project in order to advance our intent, which was to take this 30-year-old tax benefit model, European tax benefit model, Euromod, that has existed so far at national level, to take it to a sub-national level. So we did that for NUTS 2 regions for the project, but then we went further. So we created synthetic populations for NUTS 3 regions in Italy, but also in Greece, in a number of works that came, like spin-offs, came out of this project, but were not in the project, as it were. So we estimated in this paper, from which this map of Italy, you will recognize the shape of Italy. We looked at the effects of the new universal child benefit introduced 4 years ago on poverty by province level. Italy has 109 provinces, NUTS 3 areas. So we were able, I don't want to spin too much, but for the first time ever, that was something new, and we were delighted to be able to show how the results of this national policy were so highly heterogeneous by local level, really. So we did that, and then we did, it's the same paper, this particular one, for Greece, where the child benefit was consolidated 12 years ago, and it's not a universal child benefit, but it's a means-tested child benefit, which is an improvement on what existed before. So we compared the distributional effects of the means-tested child benefit in Greece relative, I forgot to say that, relative to the counterfactual of the old regime, policy regime, that these benefits replaced, again at NUTS 3 level. And we have other bright ideas, some of them quite practical. One is to estimate, to take further this transition from the national to the local level, to go beyond NUTS 3 level to municipal level. We have sent an abstract to the European Network of Housing Research Conference in Oslo in July. The abstract has been accepted, is on the distributional implications of municipal, regional, and national housing policies in the city of Milan. The paper, for the time being, exists in our mind. We haven't progressed very much, but we still have 3 weeks to go, so we are hopeful. And I think I'll end here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Round of applause, please. And so now let's hand over the floor to Dimitris. You're going to tell us about spatial, MSM and ABM modelling for those future and agent-based modelling scenarios. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I would like to start by also saying, echoing what Vicente said earlier. I also feel very, very proud and privileged to be part of this project and journey. It's been a fantastic project and also, in a way, an academic dream come true, working with people in a very close manner on methods that we have been talking about, and we had the opportunity with this MOBI-TWIN project. Thanks ever so much, especially to Anastasia Panori and Julia for coordinating and putting this together. So I will be following up on what Manos has described in terms of methods. We use spatial microsimulation and agent-based models. This presentation draws on work we did for work package 3, and I'm very happy that I'm joined here by Jun Yao He, one of the experts from the University of Groningen team on agent-based modeling. He's over there in case there are any tricky technical questions on agent-based models. He's a wizard, postdoctoral researcher did a lot of the programming for the agent-based modeling side. So, and then there's more people in the Groningen team I mentioned in the last slide. So just very briefly, the work package 3 we have been leading this and contributing to all tasks, but mainly leading on tasks 3.1 and 3.4. And as I said earlier, this project gave us the opportunity it felt like we are in the same institution with colleagues in Thessaloniki, Milano, and across the MOBI-TWIN consortium. But with regards to the work package 3, we have been exchanging visits and also doing online meetings and exchanging expertise. So ever since I have been working on microsimulation, coming from economics to geography, I have been involved in building geographical models and being inspired in some way by Euromod, which was there before, and Manos' work and that of economics. But of course, being a geographer, or converted from economics, we would, rightly so, and Maria next to me would agree with that, I think, that economists tend to ignore the importance of space and geography. And they would say, perhaps it's not important, or we can't do it because there's no data, or it's too computationally intensive. So I've been very lucky and privileged in the sense that I started my academic career at the time that computing made it possible and data were there to actually add more geography. And what we did with MOBI-TWIN, I think, with work package 3 is adding geography to Euromod, or vice versa, learning from Euromod. Euromod is extremely sophisticated in how they do things with policy analysis, but it lacked geography. And we have been joining forces to build spatial microsimulation models that are potentially very powerful for policy analysis, and also build on previous work on dynamics. So in Groningen, we were involved in building geographical microsimulation models, also going within region, smaller area, but also something that is really challenging, adding agent-based modeling power to this model. So this is something we have been talking about for some time. We have done some work, but not at the scale that we did with, thanks to the MOBI-TWIN project and the resources we had. And then the task was to use these models to perform what-if geographical as well as temporal analysis. What will happen into the future and what would happen in different areas under different scenarios, including the different scenarios that Manos briefly described earlier that were very imaginatively put together, I think, by Anastasia, the proposal setting, and that was the driver of all the key scenarios we worked with. So this is an overview of work package 3. The first task 3.1, involved building the model, building a microsimulation model, adding geography to Euromod, and vice versa, getting from Euromod the sophistication in terms of policy analysis. And using the data we had at our disposal, the European Union survey on income and living conditions, a really exceptionally good data set, but also the MOBI-TWIN survey that was produced as part of the project, and using this data to create small area microdata for all pilot areas, and then perform what-if analysis statically and dynamically. Now, Manos has described how this has been done with microsimulation, projecting into the future using 2035 data from Eurostat and reweighting the data, simulating the microdata to match this year. We did that, but also we did something, followed a different approach with, in Groningen. We were in charge of also building agent-based models, which involve taking every unit in, let's say, now, and every month we see what happens in their life again and again. In a way, Manos gave the analogy of playing God. I would like to use another analogy here. It is that of SimCity and The Sims. So in a way, I think, looking at faces here, I would imagine most people are familiar with these games.
Well, below the age of 40.
Yeah, now when I teach at Groningen, I worry. I think The Sims is still there. SimCity is a bit retro. But, you know, the idea is that it's like that, but I would argue it's much more boring, I'm afraid, because we don't have these graphics, but it's much more useful, because we use real data, and conceptually the idea we have is like SimCity and The Sims. We simulate characters, but we use real data from surveys and census data to simulate at the local level a population which is as close as possible to the real one. It is fake data in a way, pseudo data. It's not the real thing, and we're not trying to get the right. We are not trying to match the reality exactly, because that would also violate confidentiality. But we have a population which looks similar to what it would be at the local level, and it's microdata. So it's individual people. And then we project these month by month. We use different scenarios to take them into the future. So you see here the tasks 3.3 and 3.4 were tasks that involved projecting to the future. And then we analyze different scenarios, policy scenarios, and analyzing the microdata to see what happens to inequality, sustainability, and so on and so forth, and drawing on other outputs from different tasks. So the microsimulation approach involves the construction of microdata sets. Economists have been using this for a long time very, very successfully, but without geography. In a geography setting, we add the geography, and then we perform static what-if simulations. Manos gave many very nice examples of how this is done. And then the next step is dynamic modeling. And again, Manos showed how you project into the future by using population projections from Eurostat. That's one way of doing it. Another way of doing it is to take every individual in the data set and look at vital statistics, estimate how likely it is that they survive, they migrate, they go to university and so on, and apply these probabilities to every individual. And then, even more, in a more sophisticated way, agent-based models involves doing that, but also considering possible interactions with others. So you move somewhere, but you may consider going there if you know people. I live in Groningen. I'm originally from Greece, so with 2 pilots areas I'm involved in, I can actually relate to them. You can argue that the networks you have, you need to really take into account of the environment, the social environment, networks we have in decisions you make about mobility and any other decision. So agent-based modeling is something we added here, and so we created a framework that is aimed at producing results like the ones that Manos presented for under different scenarios, what happens in the future. But the approach is different in the sense that we take every agent, and every month we evaluate what they do. Will they move? Will they stay? Depending on their characteristics. And we use also we use Eurostat and other data to calibrate and validate what we do. And we fine-tune the rules to match as much as possible it's not reality because it's official data in 2035. We don't know if it's correct, but it's projections, and they're as good as they can be. And we have this framework that can be fine-tuned, and the code and data will be there to be further used and for policy, but also to potentially further developed by us and others. And here I would like to maybe draw a bit on, I really liked Anastasia's keynote and the storytelling at the beginning, the train that goes, who goes on the train, who comes back. It's a very tough act to follow to the storytelling, but I would like to use an illustration here. So let's say you are a young graduate in Thessaloniki. You just finished a student of Anastasia's from Aristotle University of Thessaloniki, expert in data science and many other things, and also a very good grasp of why geography is important, I would argue. And what do? So if you are young, chances are that you would be likely to migrate regardless of anything else. Younger people are more likely to move. They don't have family on average, and they also have a sense of adventure. You want to move for personal development. Other presentations mention Erasmus, for example. So you already have a propensity to migrate. We know from theory, we know from data that if you are a young graduate, you would be more likely to be moving. Now, in the context of twin transition, you would consider digital and green related conditions. You may consider being a digital nomad. You may consider going to work in a Greek island or go to a rural area in the Netherlands, perhaps, and cycle around. There are things that you would consider and link to your personal characteristics, but also interaction with the environment you have. So we take into account all this using theoretical frameworks and the empirical analysis we have in the data. Similarly, if you are, on the other hand, a family with local ties in Thessaloniki, you would be less likely to want to move. You would pay attention to schooling, health services, safety, affordable housing, and you are less likely than a young person to move. But still, if you were to move, you would go somewhere. It could be a delayed move. You may want to see what happens with family. So you have different circumstances. We take into account every individual in the data set. It's very rich. And we have rules for everyone, and we project them into the future. It is computationally very intensive, but increasingly it's possible. Similarly, if you are a worker in a lagged region, or if you come from a disadvantaged background, you have less resources, less options to move. We try to take all of this into account, have a wealth of rules that we apply. So here you can see here the framework. We consider the demographic and socioeconomic characteristics in the pilot area, and then we use the surveys and theories to come up with rules about different types of individuals, and then considering who they are, we have life course trajectories and what they're likely to do under different scenarios. Now I would like to, we were asked to send these slides a week in advance, and problem with that is that I have a slide later on that I would like to use now, so I do apologize for jumping into the front for a bit, and then I'll come back. So just to illustrate this example, here there's a slide pertaining to the rules of agents. So we have agents at the present moment, and as I said, there are characteristics at the individual level that make them more or less likely to move, how old they are, if they are a university graduate, what qualifications they have, income, and then we consider what they may need and how the environment, the local environment, may affect their decision to move, and also where they may go. So we consider policy also to that extent, digital access to the internet, high-speed internet. And from the MOBI-TWIN survey, we have a very excellent basis to inform the development of these rules, because we know how the people were asked how likely they are to move in 6 months, and why. So we have a number of possible drivers for that, which again, it depends on how old you are and your personal circumstance and so on. So that's what we did. So we used the MOBI-TWIN survey to inform the design of the model. Then we have the agent-based model developed in NetLogo, which is the leading platform for agent-based modeling. And then the next step, when we have the simulation, is that we create a simulation that projects into the future every individual, every month. And then after we have at any point in time between now and 2035, we can perform analysis of inequality, employment share, how many people have characteristics that are of particular interest, the poverty line, and so on. So many examples were given by Manos. The idea is we do the same thing every month in theory and all the way to the 2035. And the key difference here is that we take every individual in turn in the data set, and we see what happens in them, and then the aggregate output of the simulation is the summation of all the individual simulated people. So if you can think of yourselves as agents in this model, when this meeting finishes, what are you likely to do? It is, we try to have rules that relate to as many possible individuals in the data set, and the framework is there. And we also consider standard demographic events, like births and deaths, to update the data set every time. And so we try to match the Eurostat projections as well. We fine-tune the rules accordingly. And this is how it looks like, the interface in NetLogo of an agent-based model. That's for the pilot of Central Macedonia. So you press the button, you simulate, and you also say which scenario you want to explore, and the rules are adapted to match the different scenarios. So similarly to what Manos has been describing, we have that for all pilot areas, and we aim to simulate up to 2035, but as I said, we do it on a monthly basis, and we compare the final population in 2035 to the simulation. And what of course we don't know is what we can know. We have an estimate of what the projected population is likely to be according to Eurostat and demographers, but it's much more tricky to know how many people will be in poverty, or what would be the income inequality like. This is where Euromod comes in, as Manos said, and this is also where we can come in, and using a different approach, we can also simulate inequality in the future. Having a guess here, we don't have projections from Eurostat on what inequality will be in 2035. We do that in a way. And the different scenarios are modeled, and we have different maps also within regions, with the baseline, dark horse, leapfrog, snail pace, and lion's den. And we also have rules that pertain to the different types of areas. If it is very crowded, we have some rules on how likely it is for a young person, for example, to go to a rural area as a digital nomad. And the sophistication can be enhanced further, which is a really attractive and exciting aspect of this work of agent-based modeling. So we project into the future. We have demographic data. This is the population, but we can also simulate inequality, employment rate, gender balance, labor share, the labor force in the future under different scenarios. And these are illustrative examples for Central Macedonia, but we did do the same calculations for every pilot region. And in terms of ongoing work, one thing that we have also done some work there, we have our agents in every pilot, but we know how likely they are to leave the area, a graduate from Thessaloniki, but where would they go? Where else in Europe would they go? So we have a pool of, and outside Europe potentially. So what we are trying to do here, we have built a prototype approach that we use the cluster analysis, and we take all the agents, all the population in every pilot, and we classify them. This also relates to geodemographic classification literature in geography. We try to understand what type of person they would be. So if someone from Thessaloniki moves to Groningen, if they are young, you can say they would go to a region where young people go, even a neighborhood within Groningen. So we have types of people, and we try to match them to the typology that another deliverable that Vicente and colleagues led on in this project. We can have a good guess of where they are likely to go, what type of lifestyle they have, and in terms of twin transition, digital and green transition, how this would affect the destination, not just the decision to go, but where exactly would they go. So this is something we have been working on, and that also relates to the rules that I mentioned earlier. That's why this slide is here, but I think it relates to earlier methodological aspects that I referred to. And then also in terms of future work, we are very keen to take all this data and the data from other partners and revisit previous work on geovisualizations and human cartography, and also relate. Anastasia made the reference to weather, a weather system. I'd like to have the reference to social weather. So we revisit earlier work on inequality, poverty across regions, and using the analogy of social weather. The weather in Brussels is not great. Yesterday was really horrible. The social weather has been really bad for some time now. I mean, one of the things that I noticed coming from Groningen, coming to Brussels by train, in terms of social weather, is the number of homeless people everywhere, poverty. So this is something we map. We have a weather storm, a storm here, a storm that hit Europe with the austerity crisis. We can revisit that and project that into the future at different scenarios. This also affects the decision to go. You don't want to go somewhere where there is no social cohesion. There was mentioned also by Anastasia about the revisiting social cohesion, territorial cohesion, key values of the European Union. These are also key drivers for people to go somewhere or leave. It's not just about yourself, it's also, or I would like to think so, it's about caring for others, going to an area where there is belonging, sense of attachment, and inequality undermines that. So I have some illustrations here from previous work, but the idea is to consider this and use these techniques, geovisualizations, to map the typologies and future changes under different scenarios, or possibly even simulate what happened under different scenarios using these methods. So this is social weather, poverty, places like Brussels and London, very affluent city regions, but with also very high levels of inequality and social exclusion. So I think I will stop here. I would like to also thank everyone in the project and all of you for your attention, but also the dream team in Groningen. More people should be mentioned, but here I mentioned the people in Work Package 3 who were involved in alphabetical order here, and some of them are here. And we are very happy to answer questions now and also during the networking session. So thank you ever so much, and I look forward to any questions you may have.
Thank you both indeed very much for those presentations. And I remind everyone again that if the print was too small, these are recorded and you can go back and take a look and freeze the frame and look in more detail. For now, let's see, do we have any questions here in the room or anything you'd like to prize out of our speakers a little bit further? A show of hands, anyone? Have we anybody with any questions or any comments for our speakers? Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
If no one has a question, I always
Well,
have one.
I think sometimes that's because it's, very comprehensive and quite a lot of information to take in, and everyone wants to absorb it before they go for questions, but go ahead.
So thank you very much for the presentation. It was a lot of information in a short amount of time. One question I have is on the socio-spatial framework for policy experiments. If I understood correctly, you try to take a lot of different scenarios into account, but people's preferences change a lot over the life course. And we know that young graduates, you said that yourself move freely around or are less, don't have a family. So when you have a family, perhaps you want to relocate closer to the parents. When you're older, healthcare facilities are becoming more important. So do you take these things into account, these preferences, and how they change over the lifetime?
Yes, so the idea is that we use MOBI-TWIN survey and EU Silk to build another data set that combines both. So we have a number of rules that are related to both individual characteristics and environmental and social environment and policy environment. And they are a bit, they're not arbitrary because they're informed by empirically and theoretically, but there are also this room for further fine-tuning. So we also tried to make the most of the policy workshops that we had throughout the project, especially the task led by ESF and colleagues there. Was a fantastic opportunity to actually talk to stakeholders and people in the region and ask them, does this make sense? Do these rules we have make sense? Is this what we're trying to do? Does this make sense? And we got positive feedback, but there's also a lot of room for improvement. I think it's so much detail there that it wouldn't be impossible to describe it in a presentation like this, but we have a methodological report, and there will be also follow-up work. So please feel free to contact us for if you want more details. And thanks.
More information always to come. We're not short of information and details here if people want to follow up. Anybody else got anything they'd like to? Yes, Simone.
Just because I'm here and curiosities, let's say. But so I was checking, I don't know if I read it right, no, but the Spanish, you had at one point that there is an increase of Spanish unemployment rate, am I correct, in the simulation?
Simone, put on your microphone, otherwise the people online can't hear what you're asking.
You're right, sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, no, you mean the cartograms, the human cartograms. These are, as I said, this is, I added that because, yeah, it's also always, I'm trying to also always have some maps. Unfortunately, we didn't get a chance to use these methods to map the outputs of the simulation, but I wanted to use this as an illustration. So this is not outputs of the project. This is Eurostat data from the past, but I use it as an illustration of social weather. So I'm not sure which. You're referring to this map, I think?
Yeah, that's correct. Because I was like, this is an increase in unemployment rate, and I was willing to know, like, okay, no, it's between 2008 and 2014. Okay, no, yeah, because I was like, okay, the data, so I was like, maybe if there are. So I was just trying to think that. Okay, thanks a lot. Then that is so. For Manos, the simulation of Euromod at local level, the discuss. So, but the coverage is all EU, or it's only in the 5.
Right. For this project, we worked on the 5 countries. But I mean, you know, it's conceivably you can extend the whole approach to all member states. Nevertheless, the other thing that is not strictly related to the project, but it was inspired by the project and facilitated by the project, is to move to NUTS 3 level. And this is quite laborious to reweight all the populations. We've done it for Italy and Greece for the purposes of that paper. And now we want to go further to municipal level for Milan. But I mean, you know, the approach is there, given time and resources. This is my plea for more funding. We can do it for all countries.
The plea was not missed, but so basically you have NUTS 2 for the 5 in the 5 regions, and then working for the 2 countries you got NUTS 3, and then for Milan you will got municipal level.
To be entirely to be very precise, in some countries, and as a matter of fact in all 5 countries of the project, EU Silk is already statistically significant at NUTS 2 level, except for the Netherlands. The other 4 countries. So really what we did was to use what there is in the EU Silk database, and then use the reweighting approach. We've written a methodological report in order to project to the year 2035, and then to vary the population, the composition of population according to each scenario. But in many, not all, in many member states, Silk is already statistically significant at NUTS 2 level, but not at NUTS 3 level, and it will never be statistically significant, because that would mean, you know, a sample size which is, I don't know, 10, 12 times as high as it is today, with, you know, the cost increase that would require. So I think our approach is And, you know, I cannot honestly think of an alternative. You cannot create such large databases. You can use big data for some variables, but not others.
Okay. I think that's the questions for now exhausted. As always, do follow up during the coffee breaks or reach out bilaterally. Had some links to the email addresses as well, so feel free to do that. Round of applause, please, for our two scientific speakers. So we will move on now to our second panel discussion of the day. I think, can we find a space for Sandra? Yeah. Yeah. No.
Just take my name and...
There is a C here. All good.
Okay, so our panel, our first panel really asked what the mobility trends mean. This discussion, we're going a step further and really trying to dig into what the policy can do to respond in practice. So for the next hour, we're going to hopefully have a vibrant discussion. We're hopefully not too much agreement on this panel because we want to focus on concrete actions and effective practices, implementation challenges, real place-based strategies and how to better align those EU frameworks with the regional reality. So hopefully a lot of different stories we will hear brought into this discussion because left behind regions is a phrase we hear a lot, but the actual practice of what that means from place to place varies. So we'll try and find out whether people are generally optimistic or not, or whether we need to change course. So let me, as you can see in the slide, we have a large panel of experts ranging across from Yannis Psycharis, Professor of Regional Economic Analysis at the Department of Economic and Regional Development at Panteion University, Athens. My other side, Maria Abreu is Professor of Economic Geography at the University of Cambridge. Sandra Jolk is Regional Development and Multi-Level Governance Division at OECD Centre for Entrepreneurship, SMEs, Regions and Cities. We also have Taina Tukiainen, who is a member of the Mission Board for Climate Adaptation and visiting scientist at the JRC. And as well as that, Francesco, Molica, Director at EURADA. So, a wide range of views and perspectives. Yannis, let me start with you. And I understand you've spent your career studying the southern European regions. They have a very particular case. They've faced decades of economic stagnation. And sometimes the diagnosis we hear is that we just need more EU funding. Is this really the main constraint, or are there other factors? Is it a little bit more nuanced than that? Because we hear it in Brussels all the time, we need more funding. If I had €1 for every time someone said in a panel we need more funding, I would be very rich. But tell me if that's the practice, what we really need.
Thank you very much. And first of all, I would like also to express my great appreciation of being member of this team, of this project, which was very beneficial through interaction with different groups, countries, experiences. Second, I would like to be thankful to the Committee of Regions for offering the opportunity to host this event, something that has helped a lot the discussion, the gathering, and the exchange of ideas here. Coming from Greece, and from one of the Southern European countries, and being also director of the Regional Development Institute, a university research institute that deals with the regional inequalities and regional policy in the country, and being also involved in local government in Greece as a consultant, as a member of the Scientific Committee of Local Government in Greece. We have a close image of the procedures and the dynamics of inequalities in the country, and what works, what does not work, and if the money is the problem that we could focus on or not. First of all, I would like to say that inequalities in general and especially regional inequalities, is a complex result of a set of factors and circumstances. So it is a multidimensional issue that cannot be restricted only to separate or different. This number of factors and circumstances, however, are interrelated. So in this respect, it is necessary, in order to understand the dynamics of development across space, to have a perspective that includes all these dimensions. First. Second, regions are not bounded areas. Regions are part of broader perspectives. In this respect, regions are affected by the general trends that prevail during a certain historical era, historical period. As an example, today we are living in the era of concentration and urbanization. This is a very, very serious force that it is under a process in international scale. We can see that at the start of the 21st century, we have the most part of the planet urbanized. So urbanization is not something that affects only or deals with specific cases. It has to do with a general trend. This is a very important force. It seems today that agglomeration economies and centrifugal and centripetal forces are in favor of centrifugal forces. If we were to examine the location of people and economic activities, the outcome is an equilibrium between the centrifugal and centripetal forces. So in this respect, the dynamics of concentration today prevail over the dynamics of dispersion. Let's go on then to the specific project we are working on. Has the role of place or space changed during the era of the double transition of the digital and environmental transition? And how? First of all, it's not so obvious that the new technological advancements lead to the reduction of the role of space. I would like to mention here that some years ago, the role of geography was in dispute. Some were saying that we came up to the end of geography. Why? Because we had a free movement during the era of globalization. Today we are not in the era of globalization, we are in the de-globalization process. However, at that time, there was a dispute regarding the role of geography. Today, with the new technological advancements, and especially in the digital transition, it says that you can be somewhere to be everywhere. Being everywhere, you can be across the globe. However, in practice, we can see that the most centralized enterprises are the high-tech enterprises. If it would be true that the place does not play any role, then someone would expect a large bulk of enterprises to go outside the urban areas. However, we can see the most urbanized enterprises are now very centralized. What does it mean? Does it give opportunities to distant places? Of course. It gives opportunities to distant areas. However, per se, it's not something sufficient for moving the obstacles of geography. In this respect, there is also a geographical issue today.
Thank you. Maria, let me come to you and ask us about the prospects for regions losing skilled people. Is reversing brain drain realistic, or should we be thinking about policies that help regions adapt to smaller populations or different populations? What is the best approach, or is it indeed a balance between the two?
Thank you. I also want to say how happy I am to be here. I've been on the advisory panel for this project, and really nice to see the outcomes come together. So thank you for inviting me. So on brain drain and de-skilling, out-migration, we know there's a lot of evidence to show that once once a region starts losing population, this tends to be a process that's very difficult to reverse. I do have some examples, which I'll go to in a minute, of policies that have stopped the decline. The reason is that out-migration tends to be highly selective, so it tends to be the young, as others have said, the skilled, the entrepreneurial, the risk-taking, the healthy. And you end up with a sort of, in some cases, doom loop of a population that's left behind, that's aging and has health problems and social issues like addiction and so on, and of course economic decline. On the other hand, the economist in me, I guess the lapsed economist in me, would say we should maybe let agglomeration forces take over and focus on the regions that are successful, that are attracting young, skilled people, and eventually other regions will decline. But of course, there are always people who will not want to move, and we can't just let places decline. So I guess my answer is a bit of both. I do have some examples of successful policies, sort of to be optimistic, which I've picked out. So the first one is we know that higher education, further education institutions are really powerful anchor institutions in regions. So they attract young people, they retain local young people, and if they're carefully linked to local sectors, sectoral development, new technologies, they tend to be very effective in keeping young people in the area. So this was something that was tried in the UK in the 1960s, specifically as a way of promoting regional development, and was very successful. Unfortunately, we seem to have forgotten in the UK, where I'm from, why we set them up in the first place, so they're being now allowed to decline. So my first example is that one. I've recently been in Sweden. My second example is the Nordic regions in, the northern regions in the Nordic countries. So I was recently at the University of Umeå in Sweden, which was a really impressive example of using an anchor institution and linking it to local businesses and doing research in the areas that provide future employment and innovation opportunities, for example, green technologies, innovative things to do with timber, and so on. My third example is the GSSI Institute in L'Aquila, which was established in Italy after the earthquake, again, with that same purpose. So I don't know if I have time. So my first one is anchor institutions, especially education-related ones. My second example is providing, so establishing in declining regions innovative sort of public sector, education sector, private sector institutions that promote the green transition, because we know this is the future. And I have one example that I use a lot in my teaching, which is in the UK, city of Hull in Yorkshire on the eastern coast. Historically a very important port during the Industrial Revolution, but that went into decline and was also heavily damaged in the war, and has reinvented itself as something called Green Port Hull, which is a port for servicing offshore wind farms. So it's linked to the University of Hull, which is a very good university, research into wind farm engineering, providing local jobs, and also Siemens, the company, has established a research facility there. I do have one. Go ahead. Yeah, if I have time, a couple more. Digital nomads was mentioned already. So we know there are examples in Europe. One example because one of my students is working on this, is Bansko in Bulgaria, a skiing resort which has also reinvented itself as a digital nomad hub in sort of summer regions. Summer seasons. Of course, the connectivity, which is part of what MOBI-TWIN has been working on, really important for digital nomads. And the final one is, so nobody's mentioned, I did ask a question earlier about international migration, because it seems to me that this is a key issue in the future, and there will be a sort of battle among regions of the world for immigrants. There are quite a few examples of declining areas that are declining in terms of population, inviting refugees in. For example, some of the Scottish islands have done this, hilltop villages in Italy, some villages in Spain as well, as a way of reinvigorating the region, which is another, I think, policy. And just finally to finish, what I think doesn't work is cash incentives. So there are countries that have tried this, Japan famously and Korea, but it doesn't seem to work. So sorry, that was a very long answer.
Well, we like concrete examples, so I think that's very useful for us. Sandra, we're going to build a little bit on this question as well. And at the OECD, you work on what I believe you call a talent development trap. Tell us exactly what that is, why it's a serious problem, and then how can the regional attraction or retention strategies that we've heard the others speak about help break places out of that?
Thank you very much for the invitation. So I'm coordinating a project on helping regions adapt to demographic change, in which we work with policymakers from 10 EU regions in the context of the Harnessing Talent initiative from the European Commission. So it's a project we do with DG Regio, and a lot of the lessons from this work is closely connected actually to what we just heard in terms of the examples. To start with, so these are regions at risk of what we call the talent development trap, which is a very toxic combination of rapid aging, youth out-migration, and low levels of educational attainment, affecting around 30% of the EU population. So it's not a local phenomenon, but it's really a threat to a lot of countries. And the danger about the talent development trap is that it's self-reinforcing. So there are fewer skilled people because they leave, so the region is less attractive to firms. That slows innovation. That means there are fewer high-quality jobs in the region. So this is a cycle ongoing if nothing is done, which is why really we talk about managing demographic change. And I think the twin transition also raises the stakes, because green and digital opportunities, and I can provide some numbers on that, tend to go to where skills, firms, services, and connectivity are there already. So we see that mostly happening in the big cities, the capital cities. Yes, so when we talk about what can regions do to not fall into the trap or to get out of this trap, obviously there is no silver bullet solution, but there are a few things that combine, I think, mitigation and adaptation approaches to demographic change. And the question, what should we do, is relevant, because there's a lot of budget and money behind. So what do I invest in? Do I build in a municipality for new schools if I know my population is shrinking, or do I invest in healthcare facilities? Is a very concrete question a policymaker has on the ground with very practical implications. But indeed, a big answer to that is to work on both the supply and demand for talent. On the supply side, to work on education, vocational training. What we've seen from the work we've been doing, for example, in a region in the Slovak Republic, we went to Banská Bystrica last year, that they really pilot also short-term college courses of like a year or two for people that are very closely connected to the local labor market, to the needs of companies. And also they invented a model where they can adapt these courses every 2 years, so they keep up with the needs of the companies rather than looking at the curricula every 10 years or so, but to make sure it is really aligned. And they're doing that in a pilot part of the region and expanding that model now. On the demand side also, it's really about creating jobs. So young people, they may move to a region because they are attracted by the university, but they don't stay if there is not a job in the region. So what we've seen works well is when the regions really try to create jobs in areas that they are very good in. For example, the Azores invested in renewable energies, in the blue economy. Castilla and León puts a lot of effort on medical devices, on healthcare, given that the region is aging. We also worked with the region of northwestern Romania. They have a very strong emerging IT sector. So they really try to find these niche specializations to the extent possible and build that up. And I think that's an important part of it. But then beyond that, attraction is more about jobs. And that's the second point I want to make, also related to the regional attractiveness work that my colleague presented earlier. So people move for work, but they stay for life. So they also need to have basic services in place. So we need to make sure that even in shrinking regions, there is a basic quality of services that is there in terms of housing, which is a huge challenge in many European countries at the moment. Not only, but also childcare, transport, digital connectivity, all of this needs to be there and needs to be thought of in an integrated, non-siloed manner. This is very easily said and very difficult to do in practice. Very often, even if you look at national governments, you have line ministries in charge of environment, housing, transport. Sometimes we go to places in a mission, we ask people, please have a representative from the Ministry of Finance and a representative from the Ministry of Transport. It's the first time these people meet when the OECD comes. So it's not obvious that these different sectors talk to each other. At the local level, it's the same. So really to have this integrated approach also means a lot of coordination efforts. Sometimes it means also to perhaps create incentives or conditionalities, for example, to condition funds, EU funds, national funds on intermunicipal cooperation. That wouldn't happen otherwise because every mayor likes to have his little kingdom. So to really use incentives as well is part of success stories that we've seen. And then, of course, there is, as I said before, no solution that fits every place. So really, place-based strategies do matter. So some focus more on digital connectivity, others on industrial upgrading. And I think it's very important to keep in mind that one cannot copy a model from one region to another. And then maybe just the very last point to make on, and it's not on my list of points, but just because the initial opening question was on, do we need more EU funds? Perhaps that's not the right question, given that for sure there won't be more, at least not more cohesion funds. That seems to be pretty clear now for the next period. But what we've seen in the work we've done with these 10 regions and also beyond is that there is a huge potential to use the existing funds better, that there is a big problem in absorption of the EU funds, and part of it is the usual story that we know at the EU level. It's very complicated, there is a need for simplification, too many regulations, but also at the very local level there is a lack of capacity, there are lots of issues around also uptake, building project pipelines. There's a lot of work I think that can be done with beneficiaries of projects. So there is a lot of scope, I think, to think about how to use existing budgets better and how to also use different funds and budgets, both from the private sector and the public sector, in a more integrated manner. And I think this is the kind of questions we need to think about more.
Thank you very much. Taina, let me turn to you. And as you're at the EU Mission Board for Climate Adaptation, I want you to talk a little bit, firstly, about mission-driven models and what that means. It's a sort of a newish policy model. Tell us, is the mission model genuinely producing better policies than the traditional research then policy? What does it do that the traditional approach doesn't? And then I'll have a quick follow-up for you as well.
Thank you so much. At first, pleasure to be here and very interesting to listen this work that you have done it and data sets and so forth. And my first point is that whenever you are closing the project, please continue, because I think so there's a lot of things that you can, drive in implications. And as you know, the EU is not working in the way that if you say once, it's implemented. I mean, you need to repeat and get the advocates and ambassadors to talk about it. But to go to the mission model, the mission model, it is different mode, and to think about it, it's not the new policy instrument only, it is the way how we think about policy making itself. In missions, I mean, the idea is that, I mean, we forget the linear model, so that, I mean, research, that we at first do the research, then we drive on policies, and then we do implementation. We do that at the same time. It's a co-creation model that we do at the same time. We study, and we drive the implications, and we implement. We experiment and implement. And I think so that's the way how actually today the world in today's world should actually work on. Is it better or worse? I mean, there is no evidence, but actually that's the way actually how the world is working. Of course, the experimentation is the key, and also the draw the conclusions. When it succeeds, then actually, I mean, scale it. When it does not, then actually, I mean, learn it. And if we are thinking about these regions, and especially the less developed regions, there's a lot of logic that we can actually, I mean, learn on this mission model. Of course, it's faster to translate the knowledge to action. And we don't need the perfect, I mean, evidence, so that actually we really know actually what the historical data is telling about. But we are piloting the solutions and in real time. Some are working, some are not. But that's the life. It's also in the entrepreneurship. I mean, I used to study the ventures, corporate ventures. So actually, you were happy if one of the 10 was actually succeeding. It is the same in this mission model. And if we are thinking about these missions, let me tell actually before I go onwards, a little bit about these missions. So missions came actually 20 to 21 when there was a corona, and later it came actually the wars. So I mean, in 20 to 21, it was thought that actually these missions are the thing, I mean, in the European Union. Of course, it was not, because everything was closing down because of corona. So actually, I mean, missions really, I mean, took off in 20 to 23 or 20 to 24. And they have done the tangible outcomes within this couple of years' time. So as an example, the mission that I'm working on is this climate adaptation. So climate adaptation, there's 330 regions, the ones that you mentioned here in your research, among which actually, I mean, signed the charter, so that there was a political commitment to be or try to be climate neutral, climate resilient 2030. And at least actually all regions 20 to 50. And they all actually, these 300, I mean, get it the technical support. And that was actually very important also in this mission model, that you need the capability support from other regions. Because one of the problems in the mission model is that, I mean, how do you develop the capabilities, and what is your governance structure? And so it is like this mission model, like a living laboratory that works. So, and of course, I mean, we should keep on going this mission, I mean, kind of model also after 20 to 30. And have it that in instruments, and also have it that in national, I mean, envelopes, because that's important that, I mean, we were talking how complex the European Union is. European Union is also actually including the national, I mean, envelopes, and also the regional envelopes. So it is, I mean, really including all institutions, I mean, and countries to the same roof. Then thinking about this, because our target was these less developed regions. So I mentioned that actually, I mean, it's faster translating the knowledge to action because you test that and then you take it to action. It is the mentality that there is no one size-fits-all policy, but you experiment the policy, what fits to that, I mean, your region, then you apply that. And also it actually means that, I mean, you involve everybody, so to say that there is a multi-level, I mean, alignment, but also multi-actor alignment. It means that actually there in the regions, there are academia with that, with you, regions, academia, corporations, companies, citizens, to make the actions in reality. And of course, it depends on the local capacity and governance also that, I mean, how do you then reach the targets that actually you are aiming at. But I believe this mission model.
Well, just as a quick follow-up then, I mean, would a mission on regional attractiveness help for the evidence that MOBI-TWIN has produced?
There is a strong potential, but we need to be also confident that what does that mission on regional attractiveness mean? And I think so that, I mean, at the same token that actually we heard, I mean, this fantastic research that you have done it, but the implications, and especially I would actually love to hear more about, I mean, you know, this twin transition, which you said, that it's impacting this regional, I mean, attractiveness, how it is impacting. So what are the climate factors, what are the green factors, and how it is doing, and also the digital factors. So there's a lot of still the issues that we don't know. And I think so that you are the best space and place actually to research that further on. And then there's also in the attractiveness, I guess, there's also the issues that how do you create that identity and belonging? So there's this social aspect in addition of this economic aspect, I mean, if we are thinking. So, but if you can actually make it, then I think that it will be the core competitiveness factor, I mean, or it creates the regions very competitive if you can, I mean, holistically include the things. And of course, it depends on the people who are doing. So you need to connect the people and strategy people and implementation.
Thank you. Francesco, let me turn to you, EURADA, so the European Association of Development Agencies, and you're also a former DG Regio official, so you've got quite a 360 view. I'm interested in what a successful region turnaround looks like from inside one of those agencies. What are the various conditions? Are they governance, staffing, political, that make the funding land well or land badly at regional level? Or perhaps, as Sandra suggested, whether they could be more useful about the funding we're receiving beyond the funding. What else do those agencies need to do their job well, and how can they make things better on the ground?
Yes, first of all, thank you for having me. I'm pleased to be here and bring into the conversation the perspective of regional development practitioners, although in my intervention I will also sort of refer to my background of researcher, of course. Well, the obvious answer to your question is that success stories happen in regions that are able to address or overcome, at least in some measure, some of the structural constraints that prevent them from growing and crafting viable development paths. Many of these structural constraints have been discussed today. Depopulation, low human capital levels, fragmented innovation ecosystems, and so on and so forth, right? But there are, at least from my perspective, from the perspective of someone who's dealing with regional development agencies on a day-to-day basis, other factors that are also at play, that are also important. and that it is worth also mentioning here, that are driving indeed regional development, and that are also raising more and more interest in the economic geography literature, after all, especially in the past years. The first one, of course, is about administrative capacity and the capacity of public organizations to indeed promote regional development. Now, we in EURADA performed a survey across development agencies 2 years ago with OECD, by the way, to understand, identify what were the main challenges that they were facing, and surprise, surprise, the top challenge that they were facing was about lack of sufficient staff, lack of sufficient skills within the organization, lack of sufficient funding for the organization. So this is about capacity, and it is a big deal, especially for left behind and less developed places. If you do not give enough means to these organizations to do what they're supposed to do, then, of course, this can turn bad. The second dimension, which is very much important, is about human agency. So we tend to forget the importance that individuals have in terms of, indeed, generating, creating regional development paths. I'm glad to see that now in the field of economic geography there's an emerging strand that it is trying to indeed explore this phenomenon, to understand it, although based mostly on qualitative case studies, and we see this every day. I mean, few individuals, the commitment, the competence, the leadership of few individuals within the public organizations, within the business sector, within the education organizations, they can really make a difference in terms of regional development, or at least help address some of these adverse conditions that are there and that are structural, right? And the third, and I will close here, the third dimension, which is also very much important, and this is also a discussion, a conversation that it is starting to take place both among policymakers and at scholarly level, is about imaginaries, is about how places perceive themselves and how they are perceived, right? So, and this is important in order to motivate policymakers, to mobilize stakeholders, and ultimately to create a viable development path. And this is also from the perspective of EURADA, anecdotally, what we see also a lot, that the perception of this auto-perception, self-perception, it matters a lot and can really make a difference between a left-behind place that can make it versus a left-behind place that remains stuck into a perpetual cycle of underdevelopment.
Sandra, let me come back to you to focus on, regions that can't rely on a lucky event like a tourism boom or a major employer or some new, fast-growing industry cluster jumping up. What are the more broadly applicable lessons from the OECD's work?
I think my answer would start with the lessons they're obviously multidimensional. I never like these, what is the one thing you would want to change answers, because it pretends that this is the one magic design thing you can do. It oversimplifies, I think, often a very complex reality. And the same with the question, what can be done? I think you need to attack on a lot of fronts at the same time. So you need to think about, of course, and that's my OECD bias, about the governance and fiscal arrangements that are in place in a given region and how they can be optimized in lacking regions. And that requires, of course, having very good coordination mechanisms between the different levels of government that are often not present to the extent needed. You need to think about how demographic pressures, for example, shape also the fiscal realities. You also need to, I think, accept to a certain extent what can be done and what cannot be done. I mean, if we look at the twin transition, for example, just to give you some numbers I prepared from the work we do, we know that, just to give you an indicator, broadband download speeds are 13% faster than the national average in cities, but 20% slower in rural areas. Green jobs account for 25% of jobs in capital regions, compared with 17% elsewhere from the work we've done. So we should not assume that the twin transition is automatically benefiting left behind regions or rural and non-remote regions, but that also at the same time we also show at the OECD that these regions are not all the same. So really I think part of the solution is to focus on the local assets and to really connect any work around, improving the green or the digital transition to local solutions. So, for example, to provide also the training and talent and skills needed to even access these opportunities in regions.
Thank you. And Sandra, I feel very told off for my last question, which is, again, one change. I would say, however, that we've got a broad panel here, so it's several answers we're getting in that, and we often hear a lot about priorities. Oh, I know, I'm fine. I'm just saying, you often hear, our priority is, and then they name 11 priorities, and you can't have 11 priorities. Let's move on to whether people are feeling generally optimistic or pessimistic. And actually, Francesco, I'll come back to you to kick this one off. Is how are you feeling about the left behind regions and the twin transition? Are you seeing encouraging signs compared to maybe where we were 5 years ago? And if you've observed a difference in a region that's really managing its transition well and one that, say, doesn't, give us some practical examples.
Okay, so I think I have a mixed view about it, in the sense that when you look at maps about regional vulnerability to the digital and green transition, there are reasons to be a bit pessimistic. Including, for instance, we also conducted some studies with Annabella. Some are still ongoing. And what we see is that left behind places are usually more exposed and more vulnerable to, for instance, the green transition because, well, for reasons that are quite obvious, they are home to specializations in traditional sectors that are more polluting. For instance, they have less public funding also to transition and so on and so forth. However, when you look at as I see in my current job, when you look at the policy strategies and the policy measures that are trying to, these places are trying to put in place, and the way they are embracing the green transition, there are reasons to be, on the other hand, optimistic. We need to be, in pursuing a green transition path, we need to be a bit, these places need to be, of course, realistic in what they can indeed realistically achieve. For instance, when it comes to tapping into the opportunities of a green transition, all studies show us that for instance, technological capabilities or industrial capabilities in terms of green transition are mostly concentrated in more developed places. I mean, therefore, until you're not able to build at least a modicum of enabling conditions, then to leverage on this, you are not putting money into, for instance, green technologies without. So I think it's also about framework conditions, and again, there are reasons to be at the same time optimistic or pessimistic. Much will depend on all the factors that have been discussed today.
Yannis, same questions to you. Are you more or less optimistic than 5 years ago, and why? Or what might shift your view if you are the same as you were 5 years ago?
Okay, thank you again. Thank you very much. I am optimist. And because today I can see that there is much more awareness on social and geographical issues. Working now on the 4.4 deliverable of the project, we have highlighted 4 areas of intervention. These 4 areas have to do with the housing, with the environment, the social, and the digital issues. And I have specific proposals to discuss and put forward on these 4 issues, because we want to translate these general trends into practice and policy and practice, I could say. First of all, regarding housing, housing it's not the real estate. Real estate is something else. When we're talking about housing, we are talking about where people live. And here, I would say that, look, we start from each of these cases from the local and locality. My focus of interest is the locality because of the principle of subsidiarity and the principle of proximity. In this respect, I would propose for the housing to utilize the existing and non-in-use housing capital at local level. There are many small villages, many left behind areas which have a very good stock of housing. This will provide a very, very good opportunity, and also this would be part of the green transition, because reconstructing or renovating these houses, you can also adapt new ways of smart homes. Second, environment. I think that we should, at the local level, focus on water waste management and garbage management and circular economy. So, zero waste management and full cyclical implementation of these issues. Social, according to the national principles, health, education, and environment are part of the public goods that should be offered to any people everywhere they live. I have taken an example here, and I said this in many occasions. We visited an island, a very small island in Greece. And when we went there, there was a woman upright there. We visited with the Secretary General of Islands. And she said, we need a doctor. This is a place-specific and people-centered development. And finally, digitalization. Digitalization requires infrastructures apart from any other things. And in this respect, access to digital infrastructure is very important, along with training how to use, and also with digitalization, do not forget the physical appearance in left behind places. It's very important to have physical appearance complementing the digital implementation of tools. Thank you.
Thank you, Yannis. Maria, again, the same question about whether you're optimistic, how are you feeling compared to 5 years ago, and why?
Yeah, thank you. So I think both optimistic and pessimistic in different way, on different things. So I think on the green transition, I'm cautiously optimistic. We are seeing very fast development, particularly in green energy, solar, wind, and EV, electric vehicles, and so on, including acceptance in some regions by residents for this. I think for me the main challenge I can see is on governance. So high levels of distrust and low efficacy, and it feels a bit like there are technocratic solutions, but we're not bringing the population with us. And so, at least for me, the key issue that we need to resolve is how to involve residents in the policy-making process, and in particular new forms of participatory decision-making, which is easier, of course, to say than to actually do in practice. But there are different models, and for me, this is the key if we're going to make progress.
Thank you. Slightly more measured tone. Questions for our panellists or thoughts you would like them to develop? Anyone in the room got? We don't. We have a mid-afternoon slump. Oh, okay.
Maybe it's a quick comment on what Maria and also Sandra mentioned about probably universities, higher education institutions, and also the better use of funds. Because when I was coming this morning here, I was reading a paper on that like the mere presence of a university is far from enough for regional attractiveness, right? So what matters is how efficiently it turns like public resources into teaching, into research, and knowledge transfer, especially for labor productivity and capital intensity. So I don't know what your thoughts are about this, but maybe it's something, we don't have much time, but it's a comment.
Sure. Anyone like to agree or add to it? Yep. Go ahead, Maria.
I'll go first, and then I think Sandra mentioned more of this. So, I think it's true that universities that are more anchored in the region have a sort of bigger impact in the long term in terms of retention. At least for the UK, what I found in my research is the more vocational universities have the bigger impact. They're much more connected to the local area and more adaptive to the local needs. Of course, universities also tend to foster entrepreneurship in the students. So, and there is evidence to show that entrepreneurship teaching can have an impact, and people often stay in the local area when they start their business. Yeah. Oh, just maybe one last thing. We're seeing in the UK where the government seems determined to let some universities decline and even close. We've had small institutions closing. We shouldn't underestimate the impact just of the sheer employment level of universities, which then generates indirect effects. And of course that can go into multiplier going into reverse.
Yes, very briefly perhaps, 2 or 3 comments on that. I think they can work nicely as anchor institutions, as you said, but I think only if the region still gets the basics right. So if there is no transport connection, no job opportunities for spouses or other family members, no schools, no quality of life in general, then just to put a university there isn't of much help, I guess. At the same time, we've seen also in previous work, we've had, for example, a study on the role of the university in Karlstad in Sweden, on the impact it had on the local entrepreneurship system in previous work that we did, and we found that it has indeed a very important role for local labor markets. So indeed it's very important. The second comment is, but there's also always a constant tension within universities between world-class excellence and the third mission of serving the local labor market. So some universities don't have that necessarily as a goal also to serve the local labor market, because what they want to attract is international students. They want to have a world-class reputation in teaching, in publishing, and so on. So that's always an internal tension as well. And then also to say what we've seen in the work we've done, for example, now in Norte in Portugal, is that many universities try to build sort of mini campuses in the remote hinterland areas. So they don't build a new university, but they sort of outsource a building or a part of the campus to another part of the region in order to attract students locally, and they offer very short courses sometimes also for the local students there, because they won't go to university for like 4 or 5 years, but they offer a smaller program targeted to the needs of the local employers, and I think that seemed to work quite well.
Thank you. More questions? 2 more, and then we'll go for our wrap-up.
Thank you. I have a question. I don't know who can answer this. This is about the building capacities, right? I think it has been mentioned in the table. And I remember in a different project, we were evaluating the efficiency of some regional programs, funding programs, and we went to Extremadura, which is let's very lagging behind region in Spain, very far away from everything because the train is slower than ships. So you can imagine. So okay, we went there. It was very nice, and we were told by the officers of the regional government, which were implementing the policies. They were told by
local businessmen and entrepreneurs that say, we do not want to see any European money, because the amount of work and the time until we get the money secured is so vast that it's not worth it. So we have different aspects. So we need money to implement this. We need institutional capacity. We need this and that. Okay, are we? How is actually the European money being spent? Is it actually building building capacities of regions? Okay, I don't know if it's. I mean, just the only implementation. And the people there were actually very, very specialized in conducting this.
Okay,
and my feeling was like,
okay, all the hands are going up. I think you've touched a nerve there.
Maybe this is not what this is expected to do, but it was an issue.
Okay, Francesco, let me go with you quickly, and then Yannis, and then...
Very quickly, this is indeed an historical issue, an historical flow, right, of European funds, that the regulations and procedures are so complex that beneficiaries eventually decide not to apply for this funding, or they see this actually as a nightmare, right? And what it is interesting is that different attempts over time to simplify these rules have spectacularly failed. They even resulted in more complexities being added, right? So I do not have an answer to this question, but I would say that when we talk about indeed capacities, we tend to forget that there are factors such as the complexity of rules and funds that are also indeed stifling the capacity of regions to absorb in terms of absorptive capacity, right? So turning really these funds into concrete development opportunities, not simply absorbing. And to conclude, what actually we see, however, is that the complexity of funds is also related to the fact that the EU funds are the most controlled, evaluated, audited funds, right? So there needs to be a degree of rigidity in order to make sure that these funds are spent in such a way that it is compliant, with the EU financial rules. The problem is there a trade-off between compliance and then using the funds in a more effective way? I believe so. So perhaps we need to be less control freak when it comes to funds, less auditors and more freedom to experiment to regional authorities and more trust to the beneficiaries. Otherwise, we will never make it.
While at the same time remaining responsible in the spending of public money, of course.
Of course.
Yannis, briefly, anything extra to add so we avoid duplication? And then I'll go to Taina. Sorry, Yannis, and then I'll come to you, Taina. Yes, Yannis first.
Okay. Thank you, Vicente, for the comment. Very interesting and very, very important for policy implementation. If I were to propose one measure, I would start from the complexity between the EU and the domestic legislation regarding the administration of programs and funding. And the most paradox issue here is the most needed beneficiaries are in the less position to make use of these. This is a very, very critical issue because the beneficiaries are the less well-off, and at the same time, the less well-off are not in the place to make use of the procedures to get the money.
Taina.
Thank you so much. A very interesting question. I was thinking before, I did not get the floor though, that thinking about the cohesion policy, we could shift a little bit funding to capability building systems. Because, today we are thinking what to fund, but not to how to fund. So actually we are not thinking the capabilities actually at all. And if we are thinking the capabilities, we need the capability to transform. So the region needs the capability to transform, and without the capabilities, I mean, you know, you cannot lead. There is no leadership, coordination, experimentation, and learning. And funding alone does not deliver impact. So actually we need those, I mean, value creation processes there. And these value creation processes actually are coming from the capabilities. I think so that, I mean, that's something that, I mean, we need to feed on to the policymakers because now it's the time for MMF. And I don't think so that they are talking about the capabilities. They are talking actually which actually instrument is getting how much money and so forth. So this is actually a very interesting topic to talk.
Yep, and thank you for the question. Took a little bit longer to answer than expected, so perhaps you can follow up with yours bilaterally during the break, because I do want to get the final round of just one thing, and I am conscious that some of you don't like the just one thing, but if you can give it to me. You can have more than one thing, but you have to have it in a very short space of time because we've only got 4 minutes left. And if you could change one thing about how EU cohesion policy is designed or delivered, what would it be? And Taina, since I know you've just been mentioning it, but you can develop your thought in a minute.
Actually, I can continue. This is the one thing, this capability building systems, and I think so that region need 3 A's: alliances, agility, and assets. I mean, to be competitive, you need some assets, and whatever the assets are, you need to build on your competitive capability based on these assets, agility, and then actually, I mean, find out your partners, alliances. So that's my point.
Francesco.
Yes, cohesion policy as a regional policy is a spatially selective policy, right? I mean, the measures financed by cohesion policy are territorially differentiated, but it also needs to be a temporally selective policy, meaning that there needs to be a bit of sequencing in how you finance certain policies, in how to use the funds. Otherwise, if you put all the funds at the same time for different types of measures that require sequencing, you will not achieve anything.
It seems that regional policy today it's even more necessary because of the complexity of issues that arise. The traditional regional inequalities have now been more complex because new inequalities arise and new opportunities, of course. So in this respect, we need a focused at the local level permanent redistribution policy at the European Union.
Thank you. So I'll just maybe continue on the participatory. For me, the bringing people along is the key, or we will end up with a governance crisis. We're already in a governance crisis and won't be able to get anything done. And then maybe just as an example, also partly in response to the previous question, an example is participatory budgeting. So we know the bureaucratic and capability issues with how cohesion policy is administered. Participatory budgeting is an approach that has been tried in many countries, started in Brazil, but also other countries, where you allocate 20% of the budget to local residents to decide what to do with. So, of course, they get information, they get people who work out the proposals, and then they vote on their preferred option. And there are evaluations showing that the outcomes, people tend to choose things that are more fundamental to them than the things that look good when a politician is sort of cutting a ribbon. So this is sort of my participatory democracy. This is my solution.
Sandra.
Oh, sorry.
Thanks. So I do have one priority, even though I don't like the question. It would be to use cohesion policy to better align reforms with investment and investment with reforms at all levels of government. And what I mean by that is that demographic change changes both the needs and the capacity of a region. So a region needs different services, different transport infrastructure, different housing, especially also in the context of the twin transition that reshapes mobility and labor markets. So if regions invest in infrastructure and services the way they do right now without reforming how they are planned and delivered, they will fail. At the same time, when they do plan for change, but they don't have the budgets to really implement that change, that will also not work. So I think for me, the one point is to really make sure that reforms and investments are better aligned and to use cohesion policy for that.
Well, thank you all very much. And I'm going to ask the room to wake everybody up a little bit before we go for our coffee break. I'm going to recap some of those and ask for a show of hands who's aligned behind them. So, use cohesion funds to better align with investment. Who's positive about that? Hands up if you agree. A few. You stretch a bit more, people. Participatory budgeting. Feel free to join along at home and put your hands up. Bringing people along. I think.
Does anybody count?
Who's not?
Yeah. Focus at the local level. Okay. Temporarily selective policies, time-sensitive policies. Yes. And then the 3 A's that Taina mentioned at the beginning: alliance, agility, and assets. I mean, we like alliteration, so good. All right, so everybody agrees on everything, which at the very beginning I said, well, you can't prioritise everything, so we'll have to have further discussions. But please, a round of applause for all our panellists for this session. We're going to take another quite short coffee break now. We will have 20 minutes and we will be back here at 16:10 for the lessons and policy recommendations from the 3 EU projects. So back here, please, at 16:10.
So you're a professor of public finance? Yes. Is that correct? Are you also working on subnational finance? So municipal, regional finance, local budget?
Not as much as I should.
Okay. I'm asking because it's an important part of the work